Always nice to see Sottle getting schooled, maybe not in Hearthstone specifically, but in something. It's always fun. I'm sure you had a good time there, Sottle. But we are getting ready to go into our first match of the season and of the European Grandmasters. We have Seiko versus Swidz. And the lineups are mirrored in classes, but do have some slight archetype and tech differences. So, already you can just see for week one, with such a short time since the expansion, nothing is going to be cookie cutter for a while.
Sorry about that. There's one on my score for the season being
Yes,
muted.
I'm winning.
As we mentioned, there are some disagreements between the players just on minor tech cards, as Raven was talking about. So while they're agreeing mostly on like Mage is strong, Priest is strong, some build of Druid is strong, what particular one-mana spells you play in the Mage are up in the air, whether or not you play Conjurer's Calling, which payoff minions you play in terms of Shenvala or Jantis Barov or whatever else in the Mage deck, whether it's a Malagos build of the Druid, whether it's a Mount Seller build of the Druid, whether it's a Survival of the Fittest build of the Druid. There's so many questions still up in the air that need to be answered. And it requires not only just testing of which is the best in a vacuum on ladder, it also requires the metagame of Grandmasters to evolve. Because what decisions one person makes then impacts what decision another person has to make in order to beat the pocket meta that we have inside Grandmasters. So a new expansion lining up with the start of a new season is kind of the perfect storm in terms of deck innovation for these players, because they really do have to attack the problem from multiple angles.
Yeah, the players can definitely make a ripple effect for everyone else within their group or whatever. But one thing that does not surprise me, I was a little bit surprised overall that we were going to see Mount Seller Druids. That's not something I really saw coming too often. But if anyone was going to do their own thing, I do believe it's Seiko. If you didn't follow Seiko last season or catch much of his matches, he brings his own lineups. He practices and has practice partners, but the decks he brings are often quite unique to him and not really mimicked or brought by anyone else within European Grandmasters, at least so far.
Yeah, for sure. We talked a little bit about that broomstick tech, but he certainly does have history with going a little bit off the wall. But Swidz himself does have. We see him here bringing Bomb Warrior when it's quite a common bring to the tournament. He was bringing Bomb Warrior for a large majority of last season as well, when it wasn't really a thing that was being done by most of the players. So he's been known to push off the wall as well. Of course, part of that French wave of Zoo. That really, played a big part of raising that deck to prominence to the point where it was caught in the wave of nerves within Prison Scrapping being adjusted. It was really the French players and Gallen that were, proving to the world how powerful that particular build of the deck is, alongside some of the players in APAC. So Swidz has certainly been on the cutting edge of a few developments in Grandmasters as well. So again, two very fitting players to kick us off here for the new season with a new expansion.
Yeah, and it might just be because it's the first match, of course, but we're already starting to see the implications of even just, next week's different because it's last hero standing, but just the implications of, okay, well, if everyone's bringing Druid, Warrior, Mage, Priest, and everyone's decided Priest is the ban, well, surely those three decks aren't the decks, right? Because you don't just go, okay, we'll just forever play mirrors and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So I'm just interested that the players have settled on roughly the same plan, but then that will have a ripple effect, like I mentioned before, where, okay, then what beats Bomb Warrior? Can you leave that up? What actually beats Druid? And so on. But enough of us talking about not a game that's live. Let's talk about this one right now. Seiko versus Swidz. Game number 1, Grandmasters European Season 2. Kicking it off, and it's going to be Seiko on the Mage on the top, Swidz on that Druid on the bottom. Sottle, I know you love Mage a lot.
I do. This has been my deck for the expansion so far. I've managed to get 100 games of this under my belt before essentially forcing myself to switch to other decks to get some experience in other matchups and have enough things to talk about for broadcast. But this deck has performed incredibly well for me. I've 75% win rate. Starting off, ladder climb from bronze and going all the way to high legend with this deck. 75% win rate over 100 games is about as successful as I've been with any deck over that larger sample size. I think it's an incredibly versatile deck that can play in a large variety of ways in different matchups, regardless of which part of your deck you draw. There's always some kind of plan for you to formulate, but that's the really engaging part of the deck is trying to find that plan out of the collection of sometimes utter nonsense that your hand has generated for you. Oh, okay. I'm not sure what's going on with Raven there. I was waiting for him to finish his sentence, but it never came. But regardless, Nature Studies has come down. Just picks up the Moonfire for now, but the most important part of that Nature Studies is that it is discounting the wild growth for Swidz on the following turn. But Seiko's curve here is looking very, very nice. You know, I talked about how difficult some of the curves can be for the mage to play. This is quite a simple one so far. Spell damage minion into spell damage minion into cram session. Very, very nice indeed.
Yeah, it's really huge, isn't it? What I was going to say, and it sounds very silly now, Sottle, a cram session for just 2 cards is very good, right? That's just fine. A cram session for 4 cards is obviously insane, but you can use them earlier. I do see people trying to be a bit, in my opinion, over greedy with them, but never mind. You know, Seiko's managed to build that spell damage board, cram session for 4, and these are the game's mage wins, right? When you have access to all these resources, when you have the options to just pop off with a crazy turn, it really is just the apprentice that he's missing in the short term, right?
Speaking of popping off with a crazy turn, it's not the greatest Kael'thas turn that you'll ever see, but it is still pretty spectacular. Getting to cheat out that survival of the fittest nice and early, but just talking about the sort of flexibility of the mage game plan, I think with a slightly different looking hand, it may have been correct for Seiko there even to pass up that cram session entirely and just to play Shambhala on curve on turn 3 against Druid, which can be incredibly powerful. But his hand didn't really support that at the time. He didn't have Magic Trick. He didn't have Ray of Frost.
Right.
Now he does, but Swidz has now accelerated the game past the point where Seiko's really able to stick a Shenvala without a Sorcerer's Apprentice. So this huge minion coming down this turn for Swidz is actually super crucial for him in ways that he probably doesn't even quite realize.
Yeah, and this is the trick, right? Is Seiko still ahead here, even though both players have, arguably done the powerful things? Is Seiko still in a good spot, even though there is a survival of the fittest been played by Swidz, which buffs, the whole deck worth of minions?
I think he is, for the simple reason that now that he could kill the KT, that was essential. This is a whiff turn for Swidz because he Lightning Bloom on the previous turn. So now Seiko does once again have the liberty to just set up whatever power play game-winning option his hand dictates, which right now, to me, again, seems like to be that Shenvala, which he could, again, just develop it here for tempo and say that Swidz must kill it, which is not easy for him to do, while casting the cram session for multiple cards.
You know what I bet Swidz wish he had in his hand? A broom next turn. You can already see, you mentioned it earlier, you can already see the application, right? It's very interesting.
Yep.
I'm excited to see how that card does, but cram session number 2 for Seiko means that, for me, he's just already removed what I would say is the weaknesses of the current tempo mage. Is sometimes you just don't get enough card draw and your hand gets a little bit dry, and with a low volume of cards in hand, the tempo mage just doesn't really get anything impactful done. But he has surpassed that with just 2 cram sessions of spell damage minions. Seiko's looking fantastic here.
Absolutely love this. Exactly the turn that I was cloying for. I think Seiko just paused at the end there to consider Guardian Animal's Lake Thresher positioning. Doesn't want to put a small minion in between 2 large minions. It can be misleading, like what the correct cleave positioning is, because you might feel like you want to space out your bigger threats, but then by doing that, you end up putting 1 smaller minion in between them a lot of the time, which is even worse.
Yeah, and a lot of great options here from Magic Trick. He does have a chance of getting Devolving Missiles, which is one of the MVPs against Druid. Seiko's only running 1 naturally in his list, but again, with the amount of generation and discovers and options, even the Frostbolt's looking good. Combustion, a ton of damage as well, and he still has the 1 Thief in hand to go again, if he really wants.
Yeah, I think Ray of Frost was the Giganuts on that turn because he's able to lock out the minion, maybe even full remove thanks to the amount of spell power he has, and then keep going with potentially a second proc on the Shenvala just because of the twin spell effect. But Frostbolt is a decent second prize at least. Seiko might be considering just getting the counterspell down this turn though, but that looks very awkward. He knows that the big threat of Guardian Animals does come back again next turn.
It does, but I think 1 Thief, there's still so many good cards he can get, right? Oh, and he didn't really get any of them. He definitely wanted some of the cheaper mage cards, but Blizzard is pretty solid versus Druid. It does mean that even if there's a big board brought out by Swidz, he can slow it down for a turn. And with the spell damage, if any survive, well, that Blizzard starts to do some significant actual damage to the minions.
Swidz, suddenly, though, he's sitting up. He is once again invested in this game of Hearthstone. Feels like he may just have a window to come back into this, and he's absolutely correct in that assessment. He does still have 3 beasts remaining in his deck, despite drawing several of them already. Looks like he is playing a double Lake Thresher in there as well, so making sure that this eventuality does pan out, where if he's drawing beasts, he still has full Guardian Animals value.
Yeah, that Moonfire, probably the best card in his hand, honestly. Able to absolutely open up this turn, and suddenly, Swidz has drawn half his deck.
Oh, Bog Beam! Oh no, oh no, Raven.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? And this is why the deck works, in my opinion, is because all the cards you draw from a turn like this all synergize so well with the rest of your deck, is that normally they work together, whether it's a setup for a KT turn, whether it's getting these Bog Beams, whether it's doing any of the options, either removal or more minion pressure, it all just works together. And once you start that, that ball rolling, it really does get dangerous in Druid very, very quickly. And again, like we said, suddenly, Seiko looks like he's in trouble. He does, though, have this Blizzard to stall. But is stalling an option here, Sol, in this matchup? Because if you stall, is it just prolonging the inevitable?
Not necessarily, no. You do have game where there's already a Prime in Seiko's deck, for example, something that he can stall for, and Prime is capable of reversing even the worst possible scenarios. You can stall, for example, for Evocation, and then get like an Evocation into Frost Nova into Mana Giant Conjurer's Calling kind of turn all at the same time, to just be able to swing back any board state and set up your own lethal. There are, very powerful endgame things you can do, so stalling is beneficial for sure.
Okay, well, he did go for that option. Getting the extra spell damage minion and getting that Blizzard down is going to buy some time for Seiko and soften up the minions as well. But Swidz, boom, survival of the fittest again, which means these minions are boosted back up with health. And even with options for card draw with that wild growth a little bit down the line, he is just really looking to try and get this attack off with the minions to be able to draw some additional cards. But again, back on Seiko's turn, and Raz drawn off the top. Honestly, one of my favorite cards from the new expansion. I did not realize it went face until I played it. And I was like, oh, what? It was like the Altruist epiphany, where when Demon Hunter came out, I was like, this goes face?
Yeah, for me it was Nether Breath. When that was revealed, I was like, okay, yeah, pretty good card. Oh, wait, it goes face. This card's insane. What the hell? Yeah.
I have found Learn Draconic definitely not the worst card you can get from these Discovers or Generations, because generating a 6/6 quite easily, because most of your deck is spells, is a nice little bonus as well. I found it. It looks a little bit worse than I think it actually is.
Yeah, it's definitely a good default pick, and it's always reasonable to come off Evocation, for example, on your Sorcerer's Apprentice turn, because it's just a free card that you can jam out and gain benefit off all the other discounting spells after that point. But in this scenario, it's absolutely not what Seiko needed, because he needed something to prevent lethal, and that was just absolutely not available for him there. So a pretty poor turn of events for him. He looked like he had everything he possibly needed in the early game. Strong start, cram session, drawing, 4 cards in the end, which was absolutely insane. But I think the big thing he was missing in that game was Ray of Frost. He just never drew a single Ray of Frost that entire game. Didn't generate one, didn't draw one, didn't find one from Magic Trick. Just did not have access. And you can see even in that scenario, it was 3 big minions on board. Frostbolt and a couple of copies of Ray of Frost. He could have, prolonged that game for 3 or 4 more turns, found himself a Sorcerer's Apprentice, found himself a Prime, and being able to pop off with that Mana Giant, Conjurer's Calling it into the new Legendary that rushes and kills something into a 3/3 or that kind of bit. Absolute nonsense can happen if you give that deck time. But Swidz played it very well himself and really shut down those opportunities.
Yeah, it's kind of the especially with the survival druid build, it's kind of the finesse of the mage versus just the brute force of the druid, and like you said, without some very
It's such
specific
a big dumb deck.
without some very specific well-timed freezes, and like, as you mentioned, Ray of Frost specifically, it doesn't really matter what happens in the early game unless you've killed them, because the minions hit so hard, it's so difficult to kill. That often is the outcome. But that was only our game one of the day. Seiko versus Swidz is going to continue after this break. Welcome back. We are going to continue our match between Seiko and Swidz, and we did see just the first matchup between Druid and Mage, two of the most popular classes at the moment, go in the favor of the Druid and the survival of the fittest version of Druid. I've been playing a bit more Malygos myself, but I'm the first to admit Malygos has plenty of weaknesses. But do you have a preference of Druid build at the moment, Sottle?
Do I have a preference? Am I going to have a strong opinion on a question that you asked me, Raven? Well, let me surprise you. I do. Mali Druid is unplayable. I don't know why that deck exists. It's awful. Do not play Mali Druid. Okay. Oh my goodness. So I'm torn. Like, I think, again, it's one of those metagame questions that I had in the beginning. There would certainly be a metagame where Mali Druid was appropriate. I just don't think this is it. At the same time, I think there's a metagame where Exotic Mount Seller Druid is appropriate. I do think Survival of the Fittest is the best default position to just go into week one with, though, right? And then from there, you can react and see what you think the metagame is going to look like going forward, and potentially build your deck greedier or more streamlined, going in either direction.
Okay, well, we are going to go into our game number 2, and we're not going to have any druids, but we're going to have Seiko on the mage once again, and he is going to be going up against Swidz's Bomb Warrior. So again, less of the Pain Warrior we saw a ton of in the last season, but this list still does run Risky Skipper and a few cheap minions to help with those AoE clears, but most importantly, it runs a little bit more removal heavy with the help of Blade Storm, Shield Slams as well, but also does run, most importantly, Wrench Calibers and Boom just to start stacking these bombs against some of these slower decks that have come out in the early weeks of the expansion.
Yeah, for sure. Matchups do tend to vary quite a lot, just about how many resources the opponent has and how many cards they have to draw to generate those resources. So, for example, a pure paladin, something that we're not seeing in Europe, does very, very well in this matchup because they can generate a lot of threats very consistently without drawing many cards, so the bombs don't have a huge impact. The bombs do shut off a couple of cards from the paladin, but it tends to not be enough to get the job done. Whereas mage, on the other hand, can develop a lot of resources, but also has to draw an awful lot of cards to do that a lot of the time. So they can run into trouble just with straight up face damage coming through from the warrior.
Yeah, we do see the strong early start there from Seiko, the double 1-drop. Looking very nice indeed. Swidz did get the Corsair cash off, but having the Wrench Caliber instead of the other option of Ankar means that he doesn't have a direct answer next turn unless he wants to use that coin. Do you think he's desperate enough to coin out, maybe because of that Horde Pillager in hand?
See what he draws here, but yes, it's kind of looking that way. It could just be a shield block and chill turn because his curve might want him to coin out Blastmaster Boom if he just wants to be outright aggressive and just say that he doesn't care about all these minions on board. But there's also the consideration of Cram Session from the opponent, right, which you potentially want to be shutting down, although again, I don't know how much you care about Seiko drawing a lot of the way through his deck and thinning out his deck for you to then smash bombs into afterwards. So definitely a tough decision here as early as turn 3.
It is an interesting point because the more your opponent draws cards, the more effective your bombs are in general.
Yep.
But if your opponent doesn't draw cards, they don't have cards, so you can probably win.
Yeah.
So I think you would want option 1 of them just not drawing cards as a priority with a side bonus if things go wrong. But in general, I do respect this decision from Swidz because there are other things that you get punished by, not just Cram Session, for these spell damage minions being on board, even if Seiko, say, went off with an Apprentice, right? And a Cyclone. And, he's popping off like Arcane Missiles, for example, if he summons them. It's all damage that does add up if there's a lot of spells being played. So I do like getting these bombs rolling.
Big whiff turn here, though, from Seiko. Just going to give a lot of initiative over to Swidz, who doesn't really have a great tempo play to be able to take advantage of it. No value to be found from that Horde Pillager just yet.
It's tough, right? Just because of the way Horde Pillager works. I think if you could play it and break and refresh the weapon, it would be obviously insane. But the weapon does need to actually be fully used up and gone before Horde Pillager does anything. So a little bit unfortunate there, but I think Swidz will be quite happy that this was a slow turn. What a funny minion to get summoned in a spell damage focus stage. Doesn't do anything. It's a battle cry, of course, but still. Raz Frost Whisper looks like it could be the play here from Seiko. Just an on-curve play. And this card's great on curve, even if there's no spell damage minions available. Because one, it does something, does the 1 damage, but also it is a 3/6, right? It's a fairly good shape to stick around on board for a while.
Yeah, and that was actually really interesting ordering considerations from Swidz on the previous turn because he he attacked the lab partner first, then shield blocked and procced the 4-drop from the opponent, which in some scenarios, like if that ends up being a 5-3 or a 3-3 or a 4-3 or something, you could argue that he might want to kill that minion instead. But I think his way of doing it is actually correct because there's also the scenario where like a mid-sized taunt appears and then you're not able to clear the spell damage minion off the board. And with exactly this threat of Raz coming down on the following turn, I think Swidz just wanted to prioritize killing the spell damage minion before proccing any potential secrets from the opponent. So I like the decision.
Yeah, and again, I do think this expansion specifically has a lot of you questioning your own thoughts on order. especially with spell burst, right? You have to work out, like, do I want to play this, then proc the spell burst, or is this a spell I don't really want to play, or am I forced to play it? Or so there's a lot of options where I think the usual ABCs of Hearthstone ordering kind of go out the window a lot in this expansion.
And speaking of Hearthstone basics going out the window, Swidz playing very fast and loose with his health total here, which I think when you have Risky Skipper Armorsmith in hand is probably reasonable. But he did have the option to just nuke that board with the Skipper Barov combo, but just decides that he's going to sit back and take it all here. And Seiko just says his hand needs value right now and goes for the Potion of Illusion pop-off. Ancient Mage Raz Potion of Illusion! Oh, the tech Raven!
Yes! I just love like the hover started straight away as well. It's like, wait a minute. What if you give Raz spell damage? And even just the One Thieves are just so great as well. It's just more and more generation. I think this is what you were talking about. This is a kind of build your own win condition deck, right?
Yeah.
Where you work with what you've got to get you to advance in this game, and Seiko's doing that very, very well. Even though he didn't have the craziest opening, he still has tons of cards, tons of options. He took a very early evocation in his hand from one of the Discovers, which means even if he just empties his hand onto the board this turn, well, he has great options then for next turn with like 7 mana to just spend on whatever spells he gets.
This Raz is actually popping though. Look at it. It's so good. Ancient Mage Raz. Why are we playing Ancient Mage in our deck? This is strictly better than Jandis Barov, surely.
Sometimes
The worst part is I'm thinking about it. I'm sat here going, wait a minute.
I knew I'd be able to bait you, Raven.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I try literally every card ever in every deck ever, so it's not too much of a surprise. Brain Freeze, Fireball. Yeah, I think the removal isn't really what you're after, along with the stall. So I do think Seiko can just pick the best card there, which was a 1-costed spell that can get some good work done.
Was he? Sorry, I didn't actually notice. Was he actually offered Fireball?
Did I say Fireball?
Yes.
I think it was Flame Strike, wasn't it? Was it Flame Strike?
Oh, okay. I was going to say, if he was offered Fireball there and didn't take it, I'm going to have some serious questions about what's going on this game.
Still shaking off the rust, Sol, okay? First match of the season.
Okay.
Also, the first time I looked at this, I had to think about it. The Skipper Barov minion ordering. I was sat there going...
doesn't work great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was just sat thinking about it. I think I messed it up the first 2 times I tried to do something with it.
Try to look at ways he can do it with Blade Storm as well instead of the Barov, since the Skipper could theoretically clear up everything else, but that One Thief is very annoying. Don't think it lines up to the point where you could kill your own minions for the Blade Storm to proc as well, so yeah, I think it does just have to be a Barov turn.
Yeah, it just doesn't. It just doesn't work, does it, any other way, and he definitely doesn't want to face tank it now.
Is 5 bombs now into the deck for Seiko, which means this draw is simply lethal. Unlucky.
I will say, okay, a little bit different now because of this Chanvala draw, but Swidz on 10 health is, I would say, relatively safe from a no-board mage, right? It's not often they actually just have burn in hand with limited discovers, because I think there's only the Evocation and Brain Freeze, one of each, that were discovered or generated.
You know the nutty line this turn, Raven?
What?
I want to wait because I want to see if Seiko does it, and I can give him the credit for being the genius instead. Oh! Can ping your own minion to play around Blade Storm.
Oh, right. I was going to say, was ping your opponent in the face the line? I was like... Oh, jeez.
So it would have
That's
been more
deep, Sol.
relevant, of
That's deep.
course. Like, if you're generating multiple minions off Shambhala here, it becomes more relevant. But obviously, like, you can choose to protect your Shambhala specifically by pinging your 5/5 down to a 5/4 if you really wanted to. But it's not that hard of a problem for your opponent to solve. So, totally reasonable.
And I think the big deal as well is Evocation can get Psycho Burn, right? Which means every point of damage to face is going to be important next turn because he
Agreed.
has effectively 8 mana to just spend on whatever spells he gets. And with so few cards in hand, Evocation, you'd imagine, is going to give him at least a good amount of options.
Yep, absolutely agreed. Which I think you see is going through Swidz's head as well, as he starts off just wanting to go for max tempo with the Deathwing, and then quickly diverts and goes max armor instead.
And here it comes.
And now Evo might be looking for a Power of Creation or Deep Freeze kind of thing instead of just straight up burn. Find it.
Oh,
Though.
these are not great, are they?
There's an AI in there.
That's about it, though. Frostbolt, okay, is fine. I guess with the mana he has available and the cost, it's okay. He is just one giant away from a good time, isn't he, here? With this
He
hand,
absolutely
actually.
is, yeah. Like, I think the Evocation is fine. He can do a lot of work here. Looks like draw, Secret, and Mirror Image with the remaining mana after the Evolving Missiles. Matter of which Secret he wants. Probably Mirror Entity over Counterspell. Yep, seems like it.
Yeah, and as we did mention, Seiko does have a fair amount of bombs in his deck. I don't think he's even drawn one yet, which means this Mirror Image is going to be protecting at least some potential damage, because Seiko doesn't want to be pushed to, say, 20 to 15 to 10, because that makes just these bombs get more and more likely to take him down.
Yep. There is
Good
literally
bombs,
a lethal chance on every single draw at this point. There are 5 bombs in Psycho's deck, and he is below 20-25, so he can theoretically die on any given turn at this point.
Oh, well, there's the Giant. And there's a Conjurer's Calling, so it's all to play for now. The Ray of Frost is available for Psycho, so just off the top, he can Ray of Frost the Dr. Boom. The Brain Freeze as well can work pretty well with Ray of Frost also. But he might actually just start with a Magic Trick here. Oh, okay. Looks like he's going to go for the Mana Giant first. I did wonder if he wanted to just go Magic Trick, see what was on offer, and then go. As he's probably going to cast it no matter what. Oh, okay. Well, he's now going to go off that, go for the Conjurer's Calling on the 4/4, try and reroll into something much better, and much better he got. And he does have the Dreadlord as well, which does have Lifesteal from the Death Rattle minion, which is a 5/5 afterwards. So this is actually pretty huge from Psycho overall, and this might have just really put the final nail in the coffin here for Swidz.
It's certainly getting close, yeah. There are a lot of bombs that can do a lot of work on the other side of the board, though. It's not obviously ideal, but it's still a problem that needs to be solved, because if attacks are going to be able to get through to these crucial minions, those mirror images do need to be taken care of. But the problem is Swidz had the skipper to kind of do that stuff anyway, so really would have liked a meaningful amount of damage on either of the 3 big minions in that position, really, because then he could just skipper away the small taunts and try and use the bomb detonations to clear up a large amount of the rest of it. Blood Boil Brew is a very clutch draw off the top here, though, potentially.
It is, but these bombs are going to have to do a ton of work, because 2 of Psycho's minions Death Rattle into big minions, which means there's just layers of stuff to get through. One of those minions has Lifesteal, which is going to be more of a problem. I was just glancing at Swidz's hand and wondering if he could do some kind of, just about clear and try and go aggressive, but he just doesn't have the tools, right?
No. Okay.
Oh, not bad. So he can Blood Boil into the 5/5 at worst, and he does have a Rush Lackey as well, which is not to be sniffed at either.
Still nicely out of range at this point, though. Oh, spoke too soon.
You're never out of range. I would imagine it's just Solarian here.
Yeah, I think more cards in the deck, probably beneficial. Wow! Just going to play Archmage instead. Interesting. So he's just going to try and stick board and use the Brain Freeze Rare Frost this turn and empty his hand, setting up straight up for the Evocation next turn. Okay, I like this line, actually. I like this line a lot.
Yeah, minion lethal instead of spell lethal, basically, is what Seiko's going for. And I think really just cashing in on the fact that his 9-3 survived, which you can see now pushing 9 to face, is insane.
And Swidz is suddenly in an absolute world of trouble. He is going to need some serious help off the draw here, and Ankar is absolutely not it. I don't think he has any other option but to throw out the Deathwing, but the Deathwing can go catastrophically wrong for him here.
Right, yeah, he just doesn't want the the certain levels of attacks, maybe like into the boom and then into the 9-3 would be a huge problem. And most importantly, it's just this evocation, isn't it? It's just evocation with 9 mana and a ton of spells to mess around with. I do think he has to go for it though, not much choice.
Wah wah. I am afraid, sir, you have died on board. Swidz passing back, saying, maybe my opponent can't count to 9. Seiko is way too good to be dealing with that nonsense.
He's just playing the evocation.
I mean, you always do it, right?
There was a lot of damage there. I think there was an Apexis Blast and a Fireball just at a quick glance. But Seiko is going to take the win there and even up the series. And again, just show we're on a very low sample size of on-stream games here in European Grandmasters, of course, but just show the sorts of power levels that Mage can get up to. But for me, Sottle, I think there is a long way to go with that list being refined, because there are a good chunk of games where the card draw's not there, or you do just get sort of, the threats removed. You can't quite mesh everything together. And I do think there's space or there's room to add or remove a few cards to help out with that and maybe make it just a little bit more consistent, even if you make maybe the huge blowout turns less good less often.
But then it would be less fun, Raven. No, well, I agree with you. There's certainly a few cards that are very questionable. People certainly aren't sure what the 1-mana spells are, whether it's 2 Devolving Missiles, 2 Brain Freeze, 0 Brain Freeze, regular Arcane Missiles, whether Violet Spellwing makes the cut, whether Yandis Barov makes the cut. The Worm Weaver is a card that's been experimented with as well. There's still very, very much up in the air, but I think, the deck as a whole, I think the core of like a Sorcerer's Apprentice Mage package has been around for a long time, and it kind of floats in and out of various metagames. And it's certainly been a deck that's been a favorite of mine in most iterations that we've seen it be. And I think Sorcerer's Apprentice is just an incredibly fun Hearthstone card.
Definitely led to some fun moments and heartbreaking moments as well. So, yeah, pretty crazy overall. But we are going to go into our game number 3, Seiko versus Swidz. Seiko on the top on that Druid and Swidz on the Warrior. And what do you make of this matchup, Saul?
I think this matchup is a little part of the reason why we've been seeing Bomb Warrior come into proceedings, because of course, Druid, when you break it down, is a deck that has 4 or 5 total waves of threats and has to draw 1 million cards in order to access them all. So suddenly a deck like Control Warrior that shuffles bombs into your deck starts to make sense lining up against that. They do have the tools needed to be able to remove a few waves of threats, and they do have the ability to punish the opponent for drawing an enormous amount of cards. Whether it actually works out that way in reality remains to be seen, because, trying to counter Druid is a very, very difficult thing. This used to be a thing that we get into way back in the day when just regular Innovate cost 2 mana, is that you can't really plan for Druid, because 1 game out of 3 in a series, they're just going to Innovate you, and there's no way that you can deal with it because it's criminally unfair. And that's kind of the situation that we're back into now. So whether or not decks like this truly counter Druid does remain to be seen. But most importantly, I'm just finally looking forward to seeing this animated broomstick come into play from Seiko, because we've talked about it a bunch already. The priest got banned after we chose to highlight it, so this might be our only opportunity to see Dr. Broom do some work in this series.
Yeah, and there are things I really like about this Druid deck from Seiko, and it is fairly unique. There is the Broomstick, of course, but there are Crystal Powers in the list, Speaker Ghidra's in there, and also the exotic Mount Seller sort of package, obviously along with the help of Crystal Powers. So this list feels to me like if you forced me to pick a Druid to play that I thought I was actually going to do the best with, it would probably be this one, because it's just closer to what we've already seen, kind of work with that Mount Seller package, and a little bit safer versus aggro than a lot of other ones.
Mm-hmm. You see Swidz just plowing through his Ankar there and getting that Wrench Caliber down. Does find his Horde Pillager now, but that does now have a, quote, failure rate where it can just bring back the Ankar instead of the Wrench Caliber, which Swidz will likely prefer to happen in the late game.
Interesting here, even just the pause. I thought you always pick Wild Growth Soul. Is that not the thing?
I mean, he's already going into 7 mana next turn, which is kind of the breakpoint you want to reach. The ramp cards are in your deck mostly to get you to 7 mana. Beyond that point doesn't really matter quite so much. So he's just considering whether, 4 armor maybe in the matchup could actually end up being relevant, or whether extra card draw might end up being relevant as well. Yeah.
Ooh, okay.
I like it.
Just another really nice card from the expansion, honestly. Like Teacher's Pet, I think, is just almost the perfect card in that it's very good, but it's not like, oh, okay, I've just lost, because they played this 5-drop. I think it's just a very, very nice filler card, right? Just very solid in every way.
Someone clearly hasn't been playing Face Rogue on ladder.
True, yeah. I played 2 games that deck and was like, I understand what this deck does.
Because it is true, to your point, when even Guardian Animals comes down, this is the one that most decks don't really feel like they lose the game to, right? Because, getting cleaved usually feels worse, even for most aggro decks. And against other mid-range and control decks, obviously the card draw is the most important thing. But against specifically a face deck that just doesn't really make boards, they just jam damage into your face. This one can just be game-ending.
Is Ghidra into bite too crazy there? Is that too silly?
I supply only the finest
No,
creatures.
I definitely think that was worth considering. I am a
Only
huge
this
fan
Crystal Power
of Speaker
seems
Ghidra.
Oh, are you? Okay. Number 1 fan. Only because I feel this Crystal Power is a little bit underwhelming, and whenever you only Mount Seller for 1 minion, you do have to just sit back and go, was that the Mount Seller turn? And don't get me wrong, sometimes you do it, Mount Seller sticks, and then you go nuts, which is great. But just the times where you don't impact your opponent's side of the board, you generate 1 minion, you do just have to sit there and see if any other options were worth it.
What if I was to tell you your 1 minion was Zix or Prime?
Well, yeah, then we're okay with it. Yeah, okay. Then I'm with you.
Yeah, I love Speaker Ghidra. I think it's one of the most underrated cards in this deck. The amount of games I have just scammed just from playing Ghidra on 3. Because again, I was talking about it earlier, how a lot of decks right now are very, very brave with how much early removal they cut. So that is something that you can abuse in a lot of matchups, where you can just drop it on curve as a vanilla minion and just say, well, if you can't kill this, I'm going to Overgrowth next turn, and then you're dead. The game has ended.
Imagine if there's ever a card released, maybe next expansion, that says, renew card Spellburst or something. It'll be so, don't give it to Druid, Blizzard. Don't give it to Druid. But yeah, it would be crazy. But so far, Barov did have to come down there to answer the Mount Seller, but I think that is a pretty fair swap. As I mentioned, Mount Seller, even though it didn't appear to do too much for Seiko in the previous turn, you definitely don't want that to stick if you're on the other end there.
It does look like the most difficult turn.
Yeah. I was looking at just Bloom Ysera,
How
because most games of
curious.
Druid I play, I just try and play Ysera as quickly as possible and win.
Yeah, the problem then is that no, he would still have 7 next turn for the
Yes,
overflow,
would, yeah.
right? Yeah, so in that case, yeah, I
Yep.
probably like it.
Turn the
It seems
tides on
reasonable.
low.
Yeah, if he was down to 6 for whatever reason, then that definitely gives more pause, right? But I feel like this,
Yeah.
again, is just such a just isolated, powerful setup of 2 turns. It is just worth it.
Right. Well,
Also,
number
one of the
2
weird issues
goes
as
into
well
the deck.
that Ysera can cause with the dragons is they wreak havoc with Blade Flurry, right? Blade Storm, sorry, Blade Storm.
Okay,
Because the dragons are such varying levels of health, it's not like Blade Storm it consistently clears the board or even close.
Sure. So Gidra Bite combination here is possible. Gidra would then be a 5/8, which can value trade the Blastmaster Boom, which is kind of nice, but the problem is then you're leaving a 1 health minion with a bunch of bombs on the board that you're not dealing with either. He'd love
I was
to have
wondering
8
whether you-
available here, so he could overflow into some dragons and then just rush them in with the broom at the end of the turn. That would be ideal, but might just be a Lake Thresher turn instead with the same broom coming out for the rush.
Yeah, I was looking at this Thresher turn as well, just because you put a reasonable chunk of damage on the board, you can hit this boom and just sort of sideways kill 2 bombs as well. Seems pretty good. You can actually trade the broom in as well. Probably wanted to put a broom in first, right? Or do you want a bomb to soak onto a broom? Sure.
Yeah, if the broom, yeah, exactly. If this happens, that's a win
makes
for you,
sense.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty solid there from Seiko. As we mentioned earlier, it is something I expect to be used in more and more decks, because even that one turn, it wasn't like, oh my god, the broom just like killed 1 million minions, or anything like that, but it was just very, very solid and a very good just 1 mana play there.
And it's, crucially, it solved a problem that Druid doesn't really have answers to usually. Speak of Gidra, again, I talk about how much I love this card. It can solve some problems for you where, a lot of times other decks' game plans against Druid will just be find 1 tempo swing turn where I can stick 1 huge minion and then maybe I have a chance. And a big Speaker Gidra can solve that kind of problem. Broom is just more of those kind of answers, right? Where you just they have their 1 turn where they pop off and tempo swing against you, and you shut it down immediately and then keep going because you're Druid.
Nature speaks through us.
Life and hope are worth fighting
Well.
for.
I mean, you said
Pretty good
that the
turn.
health totals of dragons were varied, but as far as I can see, they all have 8 health.
No, I can definitely see one with 2. Raven's correct. Sottle is wrong.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, good point.
See,
Well
look
made.
at the MVP there, the 3-2 just stopping there, Blade Storm.
I know. This card is usually quite frustrating when you are playing Druid, because you normally get into positions where this is the worst outcome because you get hand size problems. There are niche little equations with Survival of the Fittest now where you do get extra minions to potentially buff. In fact, I was playing a game the other night where our producer A-Bar was spectating me, where I got so distracted trying to work out whether I could, feasibly Survival of the Fittest the 2 heralds that come off this, that I almost messed up the entire rest of the turn trying to make that happen.
Hey though, Swid's going to have to go for the Brawn. I'm just staring at that Rattlegore on the far left of his hand and just wondering if, when, and ever this card is actually going to get played this game, because when is Swidz actually going to have the time? Especially when he's just staring at Seiko's hand size right now, which is rather large.
It is. He still has Guardian Animals value remaining in his deck, I believe. Which, this late in the game, after Overflow has been cast, is not always the case.
Yeah, and I like this attack from Swidz because I honestly think at this point, with Seiko, with such a strong setup of the Ysera, he's got a full hand, there's plenty more where that came from. I think Swidz kind of is on the I hope these bombs go off soon thought pattern here and just trying to do his best to shuffle as many as possible.
How
Oh, wait.
curious.
Oh no, it's fine. Okay. For a second, I was like, Guardian Animals, Zigzaw's in the deck. Oh, never mind. Zigzaw Prime is 8 mana. Doesn't matter. I was thinking of Zigzaw's in the deck, 3 mana, but it wouldn't work.
Mm-hmm.
I supply only the finest creatures.
Yeah, got a bit of outside the turn. Don't really see any other option. Swidz
Not a
still
bad
has
option, though, is it?
a brawl remaining, but Seiko can't just play around everything forever. He's just going to give Swidz time to draw everything at that
Time
point.
run low.
Like a mini survival of the fittest. Again, this was a really early pick, but oh, okay, we'll get to that in a second. This was a really early pick, but I think you're right, like, not only the damage for maybe minion removal or pressure, but really the armor is actually very nice from this bite for Seiko.
Yeah, 100%. Maybe a little surprised by the Gift of the Wild pick. Cards like this have significantly less utility when you're playing a no Chaos Thus version, as Seiko is. So that is just a very big, clunky, expensive card for him to navigate. He's not going to have any way to scam that out of his hand.
This Elec, though, if you've not seen it too much, it basically, when it's on board, remembers all spells that are cast until it dies. And when it dies, it shuffles those spells into the user's deck. So even just this one Ironbark. And what else did he cast? The Studies as well, was it?
It's just an Ironbark right now. It's just an Ironbark.
Oh,
right
yeah. The Studies summoned the Elec, didn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, even just a one additional Ironbark is just nothing to complain about.
It's because an elephant never forgets, Raven. Do you get it? Do you see what they did there?
It's genius.
I know.
Absolute genius. I expect nothing less. I was wondering whether Seiko was going to go for the dream. The Prime into Gift of the Wild afterwards.
Wow, just 2 heralds. Interesting.
Yeah. Like someone else we know, he might be very caught up on getting these heralds buffed by a big AoE.
Swidz just not really finding the time he needs to develop a big threat, but I think he might just be out of time to stall.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is this Rattlegore for Swidz? Is this as safe as the game's ever going to get? Rattlegore can fight back very, very well, and I do like this decision from Swidz. What he's thinking is, if I don't play it now, I'm never going to play it. If I don't play it, I'm not going to win. We can see, of course, Seiko set this up, had the Gift of the Wild ready, has the damage, and has the win. But I do like that from Swidz. I think that was honestly just his best chance to win this game.
Yeah, I don't really know what to make as my assessment of, Bomb Warrior in competitive Hearthstone right now, because I brought it up as a point at the start of the show that it was the one thing that really surprised me about the lineup distribution, is there was more Bomb Warrior than I was expecting to see, so I was looking forward to assessing its performance. I don't know whether it's fair to do that at this point, because I think, Swidz has successfully shuffled 11 bombs into his opponent's deck so far, and they've drawn 1 of them so far.
Yeah, I think one's gone off, yeah.
during the games, which, probably isn't ideal in the scenarios so far, and I'm not sure, how much that has had an impact on the way things are going. Obviously, he's been a long way off lethal in both of the games so far. He's really been on a control plan, more on an aggressive push a lot of the time in the matchups that he's played so far. But, if we'd perhaps seen a few more bombs going off, maybe he could have found some more aggressive game plans in a couple of those positions. Maybe his opponents would have had to have played slightly more scared themselves to be able to play around things. Or maybe Bomb Warrior's just trash. That is another option as well. Who knows, Raven? We're going to need a larger sample of games to find out.
Yeah, one thing I was thinking about is it potentially to do with a lot of the best decks right now? The power level is very high density turns, right? They have very high power spike single turns. So off the back of that, does Bomb Warrior not have the time to just, Okay, another bomb in. Okay, another bomb in. Then we're going to get to fatigue. Or we're going to get them low, so all these bombs go off, do the damage. Are the power spike turns for these other decks, such as Druid, such as Mage, are they just too strong if they do the big power spikes? Is that just enough to end the game too quickly for the bombs to matter?
It's a very good question. Like I said, we're going to need time to sort all of this nonsense out. But there's one thing for sure. We're about to watch Bomb Warrior lose again, Raven.
Thought you were going to go for the positive, then I realised who I was casting with. I was going to say Bomb Warrior is going to get his win in this series, but it's all as ever, looking on the bright side. I'm going to see the big turns from both these players of just armor up, as I doubt Swidz is going to just play a Armor Smith on curve. But what do you think of the new cards in this mirror match? Do you think Rattlegore could be the game winner, as it feels like it is in the big Warrior mirror match?
Yeah, I think Rattlegore is an absolute disaster for the opposing warrior to deal with, right? Like, it's just so much extra damage being represented over time if one player gets the Rattlegore and the other one doesn't. If I've played various big warrior mirrors where obviously both people get a Rattlegore, or Warrior versus Priest, I've seen it as well, where there's like a Rattlegore and then Soul Mirror or Kaj, so you get Rattlegores on either side of the board. And that gets kind of intricate, where you're always trying to manipulate like you having the one bigger Rattlegore than your opponent at the end of every turn. But if one player gets it and the other one doesn't, like that could just spell disaster in this mirror matchup.
On wings of evil.
Well, for that, the players do have to get into that comfortable state, because as we saw, one of the weaknesses of Rattlegore, at least at the moment, is it is a 9-mana 9/9 do nothing, arguably, right? Because it's very powerful in itself, but it doesn't have any immediate board impact. So you do have to have that certain safety net to be able to drop it down.
Raven, I've got one word for you, one syllable, 5 letters. Brew.
I've got something close. A-bar. Is that what you I thought so. Okay, so we are going to see the Wrench Caliber, only because we just get to see A-Bar's thoughts on how to put Broom in every single deck in the game. The first Wrench Caliber comes down now for Swidz, so he's going to start stacking these bombs pretty quickly. Just glancing at the list here, there is, not surprisingly, Seiko is running some different cards here. Dr. Krastinov as well is in there, which might help actually stack just an excessive amount of bombs into Swidz's deck.
Certainly will help. Just to clarify as well, because Seiko is not running a copy of Brew in his warrior deck. It's only in his druid and his priest. Did not find its way into his mage.
That's
or
next
his
week.
warrior. Imagine. You rush those mana giants. Oh!
Well, I mean, honestly,
Jandis,
the more we
Jandis
talk
Barrow
about
of
it...
Broom? That actually sounds pretty good. Jandis Barrow of Broom. I'm actually into that.
We've just already found the card people are going to put in every single deck. Is Broom the corridor creeper of the set? It's going to get nerfed. It's going to be a 0-1 with Rush.
It's nice to see that, 5 minutes into the first Bomb Warrior mirror of a new season, we've already reached Delirium. This isn't supposed to happen.
We've had a lot of practice at casting these matchups.
Yeah. But to get more serious about it, Swidz does seem to be taking a very tempo-based approach here. Like, this is not a greed my resources out, go to fatigue, out-fatigue you strategy that he's applying here, right? That's a very liberal Barov that he used, and that is a very liberal Shield Slam that he's used. So it does seem to indicate that Swidz believes this to be a very tempo-based matchup. Which is probably good news for everyone involved.
The problem is, though, what's bad news for Swidz is his hand is just doing less and less, isn't it? No card draw right now. There's removal, but again, in this matchup, outside of the big few minions, so the Deathwing, the Rattlegore we were talking about, and a couple of others, there's not a lot to actually remove. It does mean Swidz is kind of just armor pass swing this turn. It's just not good, is it?
Is swing a necessary part of that equation?
Well, I don't know whether he wants to be like chipped away for 2 every turn, but I guess the amount of removal he has in hand is AoE based, so maybe it's just okay. It's got to make the board even bigger. in the near future. It's just tough.
Yeah, I don't think you necessarily want to like quote waste a swing into that. Like he has Skipper that can potentially clear it up. If he draws like Blood Boil Brute off the top, for example, that small minion on the other side of the board is actually beneficial to him. If he chooses to go to Deathwing, an extra 2/3 on the board probably isn't that big of a deal overall. So I think leaving it up there is pretty reasonable. Seiko just says 8-drop.
Oops.
He just shot his own guy for 3.
They changed Lackey? What's going on? Oh, it still hurts me that card just hasn't found a spot in Hunter yet. But looks like Swidz is going to have his reactionary turn. I do wonder, does he need to use a Deathwing here?
What do you want to do instead?
Almost anything else.
Okay.
Like Brawl.
Right, cool.
My point is that the Deathwing gets so low, it's not like a tempo play, is it? Do you know what I mean? Because you'll have to assume Seiko can kill it after it attacks all these minions. Whereas I think Deathwing in this matchup might be good for either knocking down a Rattlegore or just playing on trying to play it on an empty or much smaller board, just to try and use it as an actually aggressive push. Because right now, there's only a 5/5, a 1/1, and a 2/3, and he has 2 brawls, a Blade Storm, a weapon, the risky Skipper. You know, he has got options here.
So I think the question that's then crucial with that is, can you manipulate your opponent's armor total successfully for the rest of the game? You are playing Bomb Warrior, so that is possible, right? Because if you can't cut down your opponent's armor, it almost doesn't matter how much health is left on your 12 attack minion. Like, if it gets really, really low, then sure, maybe it gets risky skippered. But otherwise, like, it's just getting Blade Stormed or Shield Slammed most of the time anyway, right? So you have, like, Swidz might just be looking for an opportunity to play it when there's a low armor count, but there is still, of course, just that Blade Storm to worry about on the other side. So I'm unsure. I think that would have been a Deathwing turn for me, personally.
Okay. Well, Seiko is going to be the one who manages to get the clean Deathwing on the board, full 12/12. As you quite rightly pointed out, there are good options here, such as that Blade Storm from Swidz, which is going to be able to clean this up. But once again, is this going to be a Battle Rage for follow-up solve? Does Swidz desperately need cards, or is armor up past enough?
Did everyone go grab a coffee? Are we done? Okay, we're good. It's done. Right. 12 times for Blade Storm to activate is a lot of Blade Storms. It is a pretty tough follow-up here, though, for Seiko, because he's now in that position that Switz's hand was in, where his hand doesn't really do an awful lot. So outside of this, which is obviously great, just getting the Bomb Warrior. It's getting the Bomb Warrior. Getting the Wrench Caliber back up and running. He's pretty sure he's just floating the entirety of the rest of his mana here. Yep.
Yeah, I think what both players are just continually thankful for here is no one's dropped a Rattlegore yet, right? Because the second someone drops one, I'm not going to say the game ends, but you struggle to see an actual way to clean it up. There's no silence, there's no transform effects in the deck. It is just going to be a 9/9, then an 8/8, then a 7/7, and so on until the game ends. So, honestly, it's kind of why I want Swidz, or I think Swidz, or even Seiko, should just be using these Battle Rages, even if they're not for that much. I think you would just want to cycle to Rattlegore ASAP.
Yeah, that's the question, right? That's why I was kind of talking about how Swidz seemed to be indicating that he wanted to fight for tempo in the early game. Is like the alternative to that, if it is a fatigue-based matchup, which I confess I am learning the Scholarmance Bomb Warrior mirror matchup on the fly. I have played this 0 times. If it is still a fatigue-based matchup, is Battle Rage a card that you even really want to cast for more than 1 or 2 cards?
Right.
And again, that comes down to a scenario where maybe you then make the argument it's like the old Justicar days, where in purely fatigue-based Control Warrior mirrors with Justicar, it was sometimes correct to draw cards to get to Justicar because it actually net you health over the course of the game if you got to it quicker. Maybe that is still the case with a card as powerful as Rattlegore in this matchup, where you'll still win, even if it is a fatigue-based matchup, which it might still not be. You might still be more successful drawing cards to get to that big threat, to offset the amount of damage that you're doing to yourself by drawing extra cards. So, lots of questions to be asked and answered for sure, and I'm looking forward to the GM showing me how it's done.
Yeah, me too, because I would naturally lean towards Rattlegore because it is such a huge threat. And it just worries me that the more both players just... I mean, it's going to be right for one of them, technically, to press armor up and pass, right? Because if someone wants to do the calculations or whatever, someone will end up just... Well, if they're ahead and they edged armor up for the rest of the game, they will win. But in general, unless the deck's changed, have some kind of answer, I do feel like Rattlegore is a priority in this matchup.
What's happening?
I don't even think Seiko knows at this point. You look like... did he want to Blade Storm and then Battle Rage and then realize Blade Storm would kill Barov?
Yes. I think that's I think he thought Blade Storm was just going to whirlwind his board and then stop and he'd be able to Battle Rage. And then he realized that that was dumb.
Imagine. Blade Storm, Whirlwind until something's dead. Or just Whirlwind, you can choose.
Or just whirlwind.
Yeah. Or just do the ones you pick. You tell me how many. It's like, I wonder if it's like a say
weird.
when card. You're like, okay, 1, 2. Oh, when? Stop.
Made to fit.
That was a very weird looking turn of Hearthstone, I have to say.
Agreed. Okay, this has to be Battle Rage, right?
Yep. There are currently 5 bombs in Swidz's deck, I believe.
So what does he want? 5 bombs and a Rattlegore. Is that what's going
Kablam.
Well, you got the Rattlegore, that's priority number 1. There's Boom as well, not too shabby at all. Wow. I think that was really good for Swidz.
I would be inclined to agree, yes. Infinity Armor, only 1 bomb drawn, had picked up a playable for the overdraw, and hit his Rattlegore and his Blastmaster Boom. Yeah, I'd say that was pretty darn insane from Swidz's perspective.
And now the response. Funnily enough, even with that Battle Rage, both players, Seiko's only a card ahead. Even after that Battle Rage, so Seiko definitely been using up more draw and resources in a quicker fashion.
Well, Swidz has 4 bombs in his deck.
Oh, sorry, he's got more bombs.
Which
Yes,
is having
you're
an
right.
effect as well, yeah.
Yep. You are completely right. I was sat there after I said that sentence and gone, ow. But yeah, of course, you're counting bombs a lot better than I am in this game.
By which you mean one of us is using Deck Tracker and the other one isn't?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sweeping strikes
strike,
with Rattlegore.
drop
You pretty much guaranteed a hard-hitting minion, at least for the foreseeable future, to be able to cleave if there's a worst-case scenario option. So, nice pickup there.
And again, to quote the wise man Abar, that looks like half a faceless corruptor to me.
I'm just staring at this no weapon hand with a Dr.
Yep.
Krastinov in hand. Has got to feel pretty bad here for Seiko.
Everything
Again,
feels bad right now. Brawl feels bad. Bladestorm doesn't work because there's 2 1/1s in play.
And it's why
Shield Slam
just as
does
much
nothing
as...
because it's a freaking Rattlegore.
It was why just as much I was saying earlier about Swidz, maybe he just plays Battle Rage to just get through the deck. Same could be said for Seiko. He's had Battle Rage for a while as well, so I'm sure there was moments where he could have just Battle Raged even for 2 cards just to help him get through, because, again, look at the problem, this Rattlegore. It's a 9-8. Seiko can't kill this turn. Even if he could, it's then an 8-8. It's a huge problem, no matter what.
Still Wrench Caliber remaining naturally in deck for Swidz here, which he looks like he wants to pluck out.
Swidz is just checking out the options here, making sure everything lines up. This is a very easy cleanup of the board and protects the Rattlegore as well.
What more can I ask for?
Right,
I think I like this overall. Because
Yeah, he started off leaning towards the Corsair cache, but that would cost him 6 to actually get a Wrench Caliber equipped, which I think is the reason why he goes for the Horde Pillager into the smaller one here, because then that leaves him 6 mana available for the big tempo play there with the Blood Boil Brute and the Sweeping Strikes. I like this line.
And also, well, it pretty much achieves the same thing without him drawing cards, right? So he still gets a Wrench Caliber up. Yes, it's not got as many charges, but it's still going to have the same total effect. It's going to be the boom coming down here from Seiko. Shield Slam to clean up the Brute, but just once again, the Rattlegore is just going to be helping Swidz push ahead. And there's Kargath Prime as well. Going from bad to worse here for Seiko. Swidz is just getting the best cards in the matchup.
I was going to say, I struggle to imagine a different play over Kargath Prime this turn. Or maybe it is actually Shield Slam your own Blast... obviously not Shield Slam your own Blastmaster Boom. That sounds terrible. Shield Slam and your own Blastmaster Boom, I should say. But you are missing out on a little bit of bomb value in doing that, since you have now stacked up to 4 in your opponent's deck after this attack happens.
Yeah, I think I like Kargath here. Just keep it a super clean turn. Even make the health difference even bigger. It's a good target. Kargath's still alive. This is all just looking good here for Swidz.
Yep.
One of the times where Seiko probably wants the better or best minion to win because he doesn't really want to kill this Rattlegore because it's just going to come back a little as an 8/8 anyway.
All right. Well, the bombs knew where the place was for sure.
Yep.
Like you said, no real reason to be interacting with this Rattlegore too much when it's going to keep coming back as a 7/7, 6/6 from this point. Kobold Sticky Finger, you say? Are we interested again, Raven? Does that help?
No, Rattlegore's on the board.
So many.
Okay.
I gotta move.
The problem is the health difference is still pretty significant, right? That's the biggest issue for Seiko right now. Even though in a perfect world, okay, Swidz gets a Wrench Caliber, Seiko steals it, swings. I think the time is just too long. This Rattlegore's going to hit for 8 again, right? It's just piling on damage every single turn. To the extent that with this huge sample size of 1 Bomb Warrior Mirror in GM, I already think the Bomb Warrior player should put a Faceless Manipulator in the deck. Just so if your opponent plays Rattlegore, you've got one as well. If you play Rattlegore, you get a Rattlegore as well. You get 2. I think it's just a good card. That's my Raven tech for next week.
One more bomb shuffled, one more detonated for Seiko. He is still at 4 bombs in his deck, so even this shield block could end up killing him. There's 1. 3 more remaining in the deck after this point. Yeah, it's going to have to be the Kobold Sticky Finger. You know, I asked the question, does it help? To which, the answer is obviously yes, it helps.
Yeah.
But a more pertinent question is, does it help anywhere near enough in this situation for how far behind Seiko is?
And like we said, I don't. we called it early, and it really is just the first Rattlegore down, and especially because Seiko hasn't even got his yet. That's the biggest problem.
This is just guaranteed lethal, I think, right? Shield Slam first to clear off 4 health from the board, and then skip a Blastmaster Boom. I think if not guaranteed, it is all but guaranteed, especially with 3 draws for a bomb to come after this as well from Seiko's side. Yeah, the bombs would all have to hit face for 1 for that to end up not being lethal.
Yeah, and that is going to be game. Swidz taking a victory there and evening up this series 1-1. And already, again, I'm just excited. 1, does Bomb Warrior, how does it do for the rest of this week? Does it make it to next week as the format will change to last zero standing? And if it does, what needs to be the changes? Because honestly, based on what we've seen Sottle just in this series, of course, it doesn't look too flashy. It doesn't look like too impressive, does it?
It doesn't, again, but it is a very small sample size, and we are going to, of course, get to take one more look at it now because Seiko has to now queue it up again with the only deck that he's left to win with, and now he has the reverse matchup of the matchup that he won from the mage side. He has to queue up his Bomb Warrior into the mage on Seiko's side. So we do have one more chance to see if it can do something that looks slightly more impressive. But I think, insofar as it was playing the Bomb Warrior mirror, and it really felt like Bomb Warrior as a whole still managed to lose that. Like, it really didn't look that impressive from either side, even though it was playing a mirror match. It was like, oh, a Rattlegore happened, and then the game ended. Like,
I'm stuck.
Yeah, I think, Bomb Warrior still certainly has a lot of questions to answer from my perspective.
Okay, well, kicking off match 1 in the European Grandmasters. In a way I expected, we're going to be going to game number 5. Seiko on the top on that Warrior, of course. Swidz on the last deck he has left, which is this Tempo Mage. Fairly standard list, still running those double Violet Spell Wings in there that, although personally not a fan of, I do see the value in them. But most importantly, the big ones, Chemvala's in there, Jandis Baroff is in there, one Conjurer's Calling, and the double Mana Giant, of course. So I would say fairly standard mage here from Swidz.
Interesting mulligan decisions. I know Crane, who has been one of the players' big advocates for this deck on ladder, has, I believe, been quoted as saying that he has never mulliganed a girl in his life. I am mostly on board with that. I have thrown away Sorcerer's Apprentice in a very few specific situations, but certainly keeping it 90 to 95% of the time. I think, honestly, that whole hand looks fairly reasonable for Swidz. He does choose to throw away the rare. Primordial Studies here, picked up on turn 1. Didn't get to see the options, but it is just a snap lab partner for Swidz, which does make sense. Pretty much regardless of what he was offered, he might have still taken Astromancer Solarian. Almost certainly, actually, in this matchup. But I think the big benefit of just being able to play the minion immediately so he can curve directly into Cram Session here is a very, very big deal. But now, Swidz's eyes light up. And he sees the greed in front of him. He's going to look for that 3-card Cram Session instead.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. And this is the big thing about Mage, right? And what we've talked about before, where really you do just have to be flexible and see the options ahead. Again, that looked okay. There's even plays where I could foresee a Sorcerer's Apprentice getting played down early. But now, Lab Partner, Cram Session, and I mentioned it in an earlier game, doing a Cram Session just for 2 cards is still very, very strong, considering if you compare it to Arcane Intellect. But doing it for any more than 2 just seems silly. And now, second Sorcerer's Apprentice means Swidz is going to sit there and think, hang on, this is a good Cram Session now, but next turn I could go double Apprentice Cram Session. And then, I think the way Derek would go, I don't know if you're still watching, but from what he was talking about earlier, Derek would probably go, hang on a minute though, on turn 6, I could Apprentice, Cram Session, play stuff, and then Mana Cyclone. and this is where you start going deep in the down the Tempo Mage rabbit hole, so to speak, of how much do you want, how much do you think you can get, and what is that right amount to actually get ahead in the game safely.
Just like you. Time runs out on me.
He's just going to go for the 1, though, and the Cram Session. So, going to play it, I would say, reasonably safe there. Just cash in on that Cram Session now. He's going to be rewarded for it with another Cram Session, Raz, and another Lab Partner. So, unless Seiko puts something together very quickly, this game might just run away from him. And this is the power of Tempo Mage on display.
Honestly, I'm not sure I like this Sorcerer's Apprentice play, because most of you're drawing 3 cards, sure, but what are the likelihood that you actually get to have a big pop-off with Sorcerer's Apprentice this turn off those 3 cards? Isn't it kind of like equally likely that you just kind of draw 1 mana's worth of natural stuff to play anyway, like this Lab Partner, for example, or just like 1 magic trick that you can just quite happily play in that scenario? Like, I don't know, I'm unsure about it. I think my position is biased, because when I play on ladder, the Warriors I play against are kind of universally running Sword and Board, which, makes your Sorcerer's Apprentice a lot more vulnerable a lot more of the time. Whereas, this deck isn't running Sword and Board, which maybe you can just deal with the situation and just play Sorcerer's Apprentice a lot more aggressively in that scenario. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm just laughing at this 4th Lab Partner that could it's just an army, isn't it? I will say, though, I think I like it mainly because it's just the way I would play. But the Sorcerer's Apprentice turn from Swidz meant that if the Sorcerer's Apprentice lives, his next turn is probably just insane because he can fit in the second one and that Mana Cyclone. So
That's
I do like
fair,
the risk.
yeah.
I don't think he loses the game if it's killed, but he might win it if it lives. So I think I can get behind that from Swidz. Obviously, it was cleaned up, but he is still in a fantastic spot, especially with this army of lab partners. But I do like him not playing the fourth one, just because Bladestorm would be a huge issue for him there. It's just one card clean his whole set of spell damage minions up.
I'm still trying to work out why he doesn't have a golden lab partner and has discovered a 2-drop at this point. Like, what's going on? Surely that's supposed to happen. No? Wrong game? Okay.
Maybe. No.
This Raz.
I was spectating Lorinda, helping him to learn this deck, and he kept complaining about how bad he felt this card was, Raz Frost Whisper, and I just had to keep telling him that he was just so far off. It's so strong. Like, this isn't even that powerful. Obviously, it's insane. It's a must-kill minion at this point, and it's just going to win the game automatically if it's not dealt with. But it's the scenarios where it's 1 or 2 spell damage on board, and they actually have a bunch of 3 health minions on the other side of the board, which is actually much more common than you might think when playing this deck, because you have things like Ray of Frost, for example, which can, just leave those minions there to deal with on a following turn when Raz then comes down and nukes it. It happens surprisingly often.
It is pretty crazy. And the thing is, it's not just the fact that it's a good AoE, it's a good AoE every turn it lives. Right, and it's pushing face damage, which is, honestly, it sounds weird, but face damage is kind of what you lack with this deck, right? Like, that's what you kind of try and generate to win the game. So the fact that it does both, it's defensive and offensive at the same time, makes the card insane. There's that Learn Draconic as well, the card I mentioned. I'm a big fan of it as a generated card in the list. It can definitely get some work done, being that additional 6/6. Which is one of the few higher health minions you can get when playing Tempo Mage.
We have definitely picked the wrong deck to be having some Discover option spectator bug issues, because this deck discovers a lot of cards, and the choices are very impactful. So it's looking very indecisive with the deck so far, though, I will say. Going all the way back to that Sorcerer's Apprentice turn on 2, he hasn't seemed very clear in his own mind, what his line is moving forward. I don't know if this is a deck that he is under-practiced on, perhaps, and it's just a list he's been given by someone else and said, this deck's nutty, you just have to submit it, which I think certainly will be the case for a lot of GMs. But just to me, just my impression, certainly seemed a lot more sure on his plays with his other deck so far than he has with this one.
I will say it could just be the nature of the deck as well, because I don't foresee this week us seeing that many players of our Grandmasters playing this mage list and doing it the most secure thing they've ever done. You know what I mean? The confidence through the roof, because the deck throws curveballs at you almost every turn.
But like I said at the start, I've played 100 games of this deck, which is probably more than the vast majority of people. I've won 75% of those games. I'm 100% confident I have played 0 of them optimally. 0. Not even close.
But here, though,
it's so hard.
Seiko has a bit more of a straightforward job. Kill the spell damage stuff. And he has achieved it pretty well this turn. Risky Skipper committed, Armorsmith, and that Blood Bowl Brute going to clean this up. But now Swidz may be rewarded for holding on to this second apprentice, and he's going to go off right now. And this is, again, just another really difficult bit with the deck. Is how long do you hold off for? What do you hold off for? When do you decide enough is enough and you play it out? Swidz has chosen now, but you said, oh yes, because again, that evocation can open up a lot of doors. And the Incanter's Flow, not too shabby either.
Swidz looked slightly unhappy, though, which I would imagine he was not offered any sort of Ray of Frost Brain Freeze kind of stuff, because I think that would have been ideal in this scenario, just to be able to lock out the Blood Boil Brute on the other side, more so than any of these options that he's picked up.
Ooh.
Although Evocation is obviously premium. Oh, get out. Actually get out. That is cursed. Cursed image right there, Raven.
So break that down, right? Because I imagine there are some players who would have done Evocation before the Cyclone to see if you can do more spells, right? Obviously, there are issues with hand size on that, but why?
Yes, exactly.
What do you think of the Evocation afterwards when there's no mana available and only 2 slots?
So, I mean, you've raised the biggest point already, which is hand size issues. Like going Evocation and then playing a bunch of Evocation spells and then playing your Mana Cyclone, you end up not having hand space for the extra cards that you've generated off the Cyclone anyway, because you still have your unused Evocation cards in your hand already that you can't get rid of. Then you run into potentially, even if you could get rid of every card from Evocation, you then potentially run into burning card issues after that because you've filled your hand up again. But I think that turn in particular got very, very difficult after Swidz did not find an answer for this Blood Boil Brute. That's when things got really tricky, because I think if he'd found Ray of Frost or Brain Freeze or even Frostbolt, I think with mana considerations of either of those magic tricks, I don't think we would have seen the Evocation that turn at all. I think he would have just generated his 5/5 or his 2 5/5s, however many he ended up with, froze the Blood Boil Brute, played his Mana Cyclone, and just said, okay, that's my turn, and then potentially just used up all his resources from that point, and then gone on from there with the Evocation later. There may have been a reason just to always play the Evocation that turn, because this is your last apprentice. But if you use all your resources, Evocation's still just a good card at the very hyper late game, which this game might go to. And I am acutely aware that I pronounced the name of that card 3 different ways during that entire spiel, and I'm not entirely sure which one I'm going to settle on.
We'll just keep mixing it up. Keep it on our toes.
Yeah.
We did see the barrow come down, though, from Seiko. And as you'll have probably noticed, we're not talking about Seiko's specific turns as much or as in-depth as Swidz, mainly because the options for Swidz change constantly with every single card he plays, whereas Seiko has a bit more of at least a straightforward plan, is just don't die. Because one thing you can definitely do versus Mage is run them out of stuff. Swidz is on 10 cards. Yes, we can see Puzzle Box and some shenanigans are available. But if Seiko gets over the hurdle of this, i.e. the Giants plus Conjuring, if he can get over this and get through these minions, there are limited outs that can actually finish the game as long as he doesn't let Swidz have a huge board. And he does have Brawl, he does have Blade Storms, so there are options for him to just say, you know what, I'm not going to try and kill my mage opponent, I'm just going to try and outlast them, and I think it is very doable here for the Warrior.
Those are some large lads he's made off that Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah. He does have Brawl Blade Storm.
He does have Brawl Blade Storm,
which
does also have the world's riskiest Deathwing on the far left-hand side of his hand. It's nutty if it works, right?
Oh, it'll be insane if it works. It's just, do you ever actually press that button?
Right.
Well, no, Seiko doesn't have Brawl Blades, so he can't go for the... Yes, it's unfun to use that much removal on this board, but it depends how afraid he is of this damage.
He's just going to take a favoured Brawl instead. I like this line. I wasn't looking at it at the start of the turn, I will confess, but I do actually like it. Best preservation of removal, and I think even if the disaster happens, which it has, Psycho's at 29. This isn't actually the end of the world for him in this scenario, right? Like, he can afford to take one big tanky hit from the opponent. The bigger problem, of course, is just the Conjurer's Calling target that you now know your opponent still has, because they have the Conjurer's Calling available to split this up, and that could cause you pretty big problems on the following turn.
You would love 2 8/8s. Oh, okay. Ping, let's go!
Grom in Mage.
And the secret as well, although we know and we can see Vaporize won't, win Swidz the game, but Seiko has to decipher this secret, doesn't he? And that's the problem. He has to think, well, if this is Counterspell, what do I do? If this is Entity, Barrier, whatever. Like, well, what are the outcomes of this secret X? Because Seiko just does not know what it is. This is where the mind games are just way better than the actual card. If it's Entity and he tries to use this worm to get some, kind of trade off, well, then you've given your opponent a 5-3 with Divine Shield, right? Like, it's just not good enough.
I don't see it. Am I blind? Like, I feel like there's a really obvious clear here. I refuse to believe that this combination of Hearthstone cards does not clear this board.
Yeah, Risky Skipper, the 3-drop, and the Lackey.
Risky
right?
in the Lackey. Yeah. Right, yeah, okay. I was like Evasive Worm into something and then Blade Storm, but then your Worm's on the board. Yeah, I just completely blanked that it was going to be a Lackey generated here. This is the line for sure.
But you already see, though, the fear factor of if that was Counterspell, Seiko's just lost, right? Like, there's just no way to clear the board. But Seiko knew that, obviously. That's not a misplay by any means. He's saying that, like, if he goes for it and it's Counterspell, well, that's just the game. It's the only way he could clear the board. So we just had to hope it wasn't the case. And fair play to Seiko. He has stabilized, at least to some extent here.
So currently with Swid's hand, I'd say he has maybe 2 more pushes before he's forced to just puzzle box to make something magical happen. Swidz appears to be a puzzle box gamer right now, though. Which I think he's in a comfortable enough spot not to have to roll the dice on this card right now, but maybe he just believes differently. Alright, it's off to a decent start.
Oh, okay.
Fine.
Ooh,
See,
big one.
so this was my worry with that kind of scenario is that the one thing Puzzle Box generally does very consistently is generate you a bunch of resources, right? And Swidz still had some pretty key cards left in his deck, Astromancer Solarian, for example. So therefore, like, filling his hand and starting to overdraw cards, which he very, very nearly did that turn, can just be an absolute disaster against Bomb Warrior, right? Like, not only because you lose key cards like Astromancer Solarian and then your Prime, but also because your deck is now nothing. So you're going to draw bombs basically every turn if Seiko can ever get to the point where he's allowed to start shuffling. So I was much more reticent with the puzzle box there than Swidz was, but remains to be seen.
Yeah, funnily enough to me, so all I see is a deck full of legendaries. As that reform can just make this game a little bit crazier if Swidz really wants to. But most importantly, okay, he's gone for this is nice. The Firebrand is a card that I didn't put much stake in, but as soon as I started playing it, I was like, wow, this is actually just a very, very good card. Like, the amount of damage it actually does with that spell burst is huge.
Raven, I played enough Marvel to know that Firebrand is always broken. I know you don't understand that reference, but some people were very happy about it, I promise you.
Don't believe you. I think it's like one person, and that one person is you.
That one person is Apology Man, yeah.
So many choices.
Well, I said Seiko just needs to stabilize, but this is starting to slowly get a bit too much, right? And the fact that we can see Swidz has more waves of threats available to him as well. This might be a bit too much for Seiko to keep hold of here, and we might be slowly edging towards the end of this series. These bombs aren't
Apparently
going to
Vaporize Never Surrender in play.
Yes.
Seiko correctly identifies the barrel outcomes and is able to create most of the board clear here. And like I said, there is just some element of danger now because this is a lot of bombs coming out very, very quickly for Swidz if he does not end this game close to immediately.
I wonder.
You fight me, you get burned.
What do you think of Swidz here trying to cast everything but the Evocation and set up for next turn with the Evocation with as many cards as possible?
I mean, it's kind of a problem in that one of his cards is Arcane Intellect, which seems less than ideal in the situation. One of his cards is Mana Cyclone, which doesn't really do the thing that you want it to do in terms of getting out of your hand in this scenario. So I think just evaluating what he had in hand there, I think that was about as good as the Evocation was going to get.
Oh, and Solarian, always nice pickup. Gonna help as well. Solarian at this kind of health for Seiko. A Prime could just finish him, and now that Fireball as well, a massive pickup. And Seiko, I think Seiko just has too much to do now. There are just too many different things he has to deal with. Gain health, clear the board, navigate these secrets, which actually makes clearing the board harder, because we know one is never surrender. This might just be too much.
Yeah, certainly looking like Bomb Warrior yet again is going to be struggling in this series. I believe Bomb Warrior has lost 3 times and won once, and that win was in the mirror specifically. So that is not a good performance for Bomb Warrior in this series. After I said at the start, it was kind of the unexpected deck for me to be seeing, 60% plus of the Grandmasters in Europe bringing it to the tournament. And might just be something that we're seeing a fair amount throughout the broadcast is Bomb Warrior struggled to get a win like that. But there's still plenty of time left, and it might just absolutely stomp through the other 4 series that we have throughout the day. So we will wait and see.
Yeah, that's it. It's something I love, especially about this first few weeks, is after so many Swiss games, after all weekend of top 8, on the Monday, sit there and go, right, what were the stats? Like what did well, what failed, what do you think the changes are going to be in lineups for next week, and so on. Adding a new format with last year standing, and honestly, this season's only going to get better and better. But for now, that Fireball, the spell damage, and like we said, Seiko just had to do too much. Any burn generated would have been insane for Swidz. He got the Fireball, he gets the game, and he gets the series, taking down Seiko 3-2 in a very, very close back-and-forth series. But again, with both players bringing very similar lineups, I kind of expected as much.
And it's nice to see Swidz there at the end, highlighting the card that was really key to his victory. He managed to very skillfully avoid throwing the game by playing Archvillain Reform, because that card has never won a single game of Hearthstone in its entire existence. So congratulations, and then just showed it to the world at the end. Like, yeah, I'm smart. I didn't play this card. Don't worry.
A really close and nice series to kick off Grandmasters here over in the European region. But now we have plenty more coming up. We've got Ball Control versus Yala as our second match of the group of the day. But before we do get into that, we're going to move to a quick break while we get their players ready. So don't go anywhere, and we'll be right back with some more Hearthstone Grandmasters.